deputy prime minister for their speech. One of my wings is losing his mind. We're just smart enough to judge the electronics. And I welcome the deputy leader of opposition to close out the top half.
Honorable Speaker, I love in this round how the government paints us as dreamers that talk about something impossible, when they tell us on their side of the house that they're completely going to make it to integrate Kurds in the Turkish society and in Iraq. Well, it is a long-standing cultural differences that span over hundreds of years, and we think it is highly improbable in their side that this integration will happen. We think that, as my partner said, we have a unique opportunity right now to have this state and to actually make it that we get all the benefits that my partner tells you, but we also get the benefit of the integration on that they tell you on their side of the house, because as was stated by my partner, by removing the PKK from Turkey, you remove the polarization of the Turkish people towards the Kurds. You make it easier for the Kurdish people that are in Turkey to actually integrate themselves. I'll go into first a little bit of verification with a step on their side, and then reconstruction of the material that was left. That was touched by my partner. Okay. So, they tell you not all people believe, so this is not what we said. We said that the people that go, the fact is that there's a rhetoric that is used by the PKK to polarize many Kurds, and you have to understand that they use this rhetoric to make it that the Kurds actually do extremist act against the Turkish people. This extremist act makes it that Erdogan has an easier way of actually polarizing the rest of Turkey against the Kurds and making them more excluded in society. We think by actually offering this to the Kurdish state, you remove the ability of the PKK to polarize first the Kurdish people. It makes it easier for the Kurdish people or extremists just to move to the state, and even if they don't want to, the perception of oppression from the Kurdish is reduced, and therefore they're less prone to go into extremist act. Therefore, they won't antagonize Turkey, and therefore the feedback loop of actually further oppressing the Turkish will be removed, and it will be easier to integrate them in society. We think that in this benefit, you get this benefit, and you get all these benefits of actually having representation on the outside of the house, because you can now actually fight for office, because there's a possibility that you're not seen as terrorists. Then they tell you, you move just the other side of the border. We think for Turkey, just having Kurds outside the border is much better than having them inside their border. We think that the main reason that they actually have a problem with them.
Okay, so if you just admitted that a lot of Kurds in southern Turkey are not going to move to this new state, then aren't you just fucking over all of those Kurds who, for whatever reason, choose to stay because, still there's no actual integration that's happened, there's no reduction of animosity, and the same problems they're experiencing with the status quo continue to perpetuate into,
Seriously, I just did 1 minute of analysis on exactly that, on how you actually facilitate, Kurds integration. Thank you for the question. That being said, you move on your side of the border. We think that for Turkey, it is a very good thing that you actually remove in the perception of Turkish people the presence of the Kurds and the extremist Kurds. We think that this in itself is sufficient for Turkish people to elect a government that will be less actually antagonizing towards the Kurds. We think this is highly beneficial for actually the trade deals that the Kurd people will then be able to actually do with Turkey. We think that Turkey will have a great benefit of actually doing those deals because they don't want the Kurds to come back, to flow back, or at least the PKK to regain its ability to do these types of propaganda that they are oppressed. So we think that it's going to be largely beneficial, and this gives you a road to Europe, so all their trade deals, things not being able to trade with Europe or anybody else, completely falls on that. So I think, so they tell you increase the PKK power. I told you how you don't do that. You remove the power of PKK to use their main propaganda tool, and I think I already stated that. They also talk about animosity. I think I have addressed that. Then they say, this is very interesting. They tell you that the PKK wants what's the best for people. I think this is true. I think the PKK, in a bad way, think that they're actually helping Kurdish people. I think, however, the fact that they're actually polarizing people into extremist acts actually are hurting the Kurdish people more than it's helping them. I think that in a case where you remove the ability of the PKK to polarize people, then they could actually, under a new name, let's be honest, under a new name, they could be reintegrated in the Kurdish government and actually offers a good integration of the Kurdish people and maybe a better option. Because now the Turkish itself, the Turkish people in general will not perceive Kurds as terrorists anymore. We think this is enough.
Do you think that the basis of Turkey Turkish nationalism, like what Erdogan supports, and the PKK's Kurdish nationalism, is based entirely in rhetoric, or are there historical patterns and differences that aren't likely to go away after changing?
I think we have that on both sides of the house. I don't see any mechanism on your side of the house to mitigating that. I think on our side of the house, we actually have something that will change the rhetoric. Please tell me more if you want to, if you want to do that in your extension. That being said, please. So this was pretty much the material that was brought by opening up. Now let's go back to what my partner said. I think my partner said a lot of very smart things. Like it gives you many examples on how you actually break the about the where now why is now the right moment to do that. I think this was largely ignored by opening up. Like they don't actually contest the fact that now the Kurdish state has a very good incentive to do that, and it is a very good incentive. But I'll add one more thing on that. I think that if you have the ability to do it, I think you have the moral obligation as the Kurdish people to actually take that portion piece. Why is that? I think it is highly problematic if you cannot say to your children, we did not do anything to actually increase our independence towards a country that has largely oppressed us towards many years. Considering that those children are born through a lottery of birth, it is incredibly unacceptable to not take the opportunity to do everything in your power to obtain greater power inside of your border and just be able to represent yourself inside of your border. We think it is highly problematic to not do this just in a sense of moral background, because if you don't do it, then it means that you accept that the other people will be submitted to the same oppression that you have been for years. And even if that oppression changed, therefore, you didn't know at this time, therefore, there were obligations to do it correctly. We think that because of the state that it is now, the Kurdish people, and this was the key my partner argument, are able to have a strong army. We think that what we offer on our side of the house is the inability for Iraq or Turkey to remove that power like that they will gain from a Canadian state, because it is incredibly easy for them to give them, oh, we'll give you power in our government. But in 5-10 years down the road, they need that rhetoric back again and remove that power. We think that was clearly stated by my partner. You get the ability to get a stable state that you don't get on your side of the house. It is much harder to remove a state, mostly considering that the Kurdish state will have a strong enough army to protect its border, and considering that how Iraq and Turkey are right now, we think that you are able to maintain that state. For all these reasons, we are proud to.
I thank the DLO for their speech, and I welcome the member of government to give a speech not exceeding 7 minutes.
Kurdistan that they established, you would have, as OG talked about, minority Turks and minority Arabs who are left over from the remnants of the land that you've taken that would still be living there. Right? So in that case, this would be mutually exclusive. So you have two alternatives really if you want to establish a Kurdish state, right? You have on the one hand, you create a democratic state. What is the reality that looks like? Like how would the Kurds make sure that this state is perpetuating their power? It would have to be a state that would be almost Israeli-style apartheid, in which you have a government that's saying that you are a Jewish state, but on the one hand also saying that you're a democracy, while on the one hand you don't want a democracy, because then what would happen if a Palestinian, God forbid, suddenly rose to high ranks in the government of a Jewish state? It would be antithetical to the reality that you are an ethno-specific state and a democracy. Those two things cannot exist. So on the one hand, you have a democratic state established, but you have like an apartheid-style regime oppressing Turks and Arabs within the country. The alternative is you establish a Kurdish dictatorship, which is just as bad because then you have Arab and Turk minorities oppressed similar to how Saddam oppressed minorities. And this kind of gets to this ideology of the pedagogy of the oppressed. Just because an oppressed suddenly gains power does not mean they realize oppression. This is the circle of oppression, right? So this is how oppressors can become the oppressors themselves. The oppressed can become the oppressors themselves, and this perpetuates oppression in itself. We can see this that if we allow the Kurds in either of these situations, whether we somehow, in the best case, create a democratic state, if it's an ethno-specific state, it would inherently have to be racial and be giving out jobs to people who are Kurdish, who are in styles of government, who are Kurdish, not the Turks, are creating oppression to them, and then obviously in a dictatorship it would be brutal oppression of the groups that oppressed them in the past. Now, moving on to the second point, why Kurdistan looks like right now. On the macro form, right, in order to establish Kurdistan, one of the things we have to talk about, this is not just land from Iraq and Turkey. Kurdistan looks like taking land from Syria, Iraq, Turkey, and Iran, right? You're taking land from 4 sovereign nations. That's the historical Kurdistan that Kurds have been talking about for a while. That's where they historically have lived, right? So on one hand, you're taking land from all these groups. Now, furthermore, let's follow along this example. What do the Kurds look like right now? They look like heavily armed groups like the Peshmerga and YPG in Syria. These Kurds are suddenly armed like more than they've ever been because they have received backing from the United States and Europe and heavy ammunition and arms from there. So it's not too far of a stretch to believe that the US and European nations will likely support Kurdistan after its inception. Now, another point to also realize here is one of the strongest international supporters of separatist Kurdistan is Israel. Why is Israel interested in a Kurdistan separatist state? They're interested because it would be a checkback against Arab states in the region, which would help them geopolitically. So let's paint this picture for a second, right? You've established Kurdistan that is fundamentally backed by the United States and Europe, and also backed by Israel. How do you think the Arab world is going to react to the Western powers once again redrawing the borders within the Middle East, while also backing up power right in the heart of the Arab Muslim world? How do you think that's going to go? It didn't go so well in 1947. I don't think it will be wise to repeat the mistakes of the past again. Now, furthermore, let's look at this at the micro level. How does the individual Kurd actually suffer in this situation? The OG talked about this more, is further demonization and otherization, right? This would react, if Kurds are in reality being backed as like neoliberal puppets of the West, Arab states would view them vehemently as traitors, as puppets, as sellouts. They would no longer view them as the Sunni Muslim brothers that they do in the status quo. They would view them as the other. Back.
It seems like you just hate nationalism in general. But particularly for this motion, why is the nationalism from them coming so bad, given that there are barely any minorities in most of the places where Kurds live?
Yes. And actually, that's not true at all, because you're talking about appropriating land and taking people out of Syria, out of Iraq, out of Iran, out of all these places. You are, on the one hand, either going to have to completely jettison all Iraqis, all Syrians, all Turks, all Iranis out of the lands that you reappropriate from Kurdistan, or you'll have to keep them in place, in which case these tell you it's still bad. Now, let's get on to this point, because I'm going to address the POI in a second, but let's look at what it looks like when you have a radical group go to compromise. What is the Kurdish reality? They talk about this mainly about the PKK, that they're a violent group, this will help them if we just give them their own state. First of all, giving fundamentalists a state is never a good idea. Check what happened with the Mujahideen when they established Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Not a good idea. We got 9/11 happened as a result of that. Furthermore, how can this actually be helpful? We look at the Chechen separatists as an analogous example. This was a group that was violently protesting the Russian occupation of Chechen land, and Chechens were protesting in order to create a Chechen state. Now, what ended up happening after that violent protest, violent demonstration against Russia, and a violent war? It resulted in Russia actually actually coming to the negotiating table to further a compromise in which the redressal of Chechen harms were met in order to bring them into a larger fold of Russia. What does this mean for Kurds, right? What can we look for in this situation? On the one hand, if you want a state or inclusion, this is the kind of state you have to look at. Either you create a state in which you have massive instability in not just Kurdistan, but the Middle East as a whole. You have demonization of Kurds on a micro level. Or the second alternative, which is inclusion, which is what we have to look at right now, is capitalize on the compromise you are being offered right now. Kurds are being offered places in Turkish government like at unprecedented levels in the status quo right now because of what's happening. This is a time for Kurds to actually go back into a mutual economy, go back into inclusive society versus death in a state.
I thank Member Plummer for their speech, and I welcome the member of opposition.
Honorable Speaker, it seems like opening government, and particularly in opening up, we heard a lot about how Iraq and the way individuals from the Kurdish regions should be able to fight for independent Kurdistan. We think that in closing opposition, we will tell you that, you know what, let's meet them at their best. We think we're fine defending it, even in the case of Turkey. We think this is probably okay because given most overwhelming majority of Kurds live in Turkey anyway, let's do it, let's give it the debate that they want. Before that, Graham and I will be giving you a trifecta extension on why we believe Kurds